Hey everyone, this is my 3rd anniversary on YouTube video, and excuse me, and I put out a call asking for questions for a Q&A video. I guess I kind of like that as the way to celebrate little milestones here on YouTube, because I always enjoy other people's Q&As. I always enjoy getting questions from people. So I put out the call, I think about 4 days ago, 5 days ago at the most, and 14 of you were kind enough to leave me some questions on Twitter and here on YouTube, mostly on YouTube if you're on Twitter. So it's been a fun ride. But I think the first year was the most exciting. I think it just, although it's kind of weird, or cool and weird, how it's a normal part of my life now. So anyhow, I will get to the questions. The first one, and this is in the order that they came in to me. The first one is from Jcseiji. He's trained us how to pronounce his YouTube name. That's Jerry. An extremely eclectic collector. He collects so many more different things than I do. I dip in most when he's talking about comic books, but I do watch some of his other videos. Anyway, and Jerry's been on, it feels like, what, Jerry, 2.5 years? So pretty close to me. So I feel like we're old timers together. And Jerry's first question was, do you buy comics mostly online or at walk-in stores? Mostly at walk-in stores. I live in a metropolitan area of about 1.5 million people, I think, so that supports a lot of comic book stores. Plus, there's a comic book store 5 blocks that way, 6 blocks that way, right by my house. They actually just opened a used comics only store 3 blocks away from my house that way. Another mile away is another store. About a 15-minute drive, 10-minute drive from my workplace is a store, and there's a bunch of other stores. So there's stores all over the place. I get my new comics at a 20% discount from that closest by store, and I think they have the best discount that I'm aware of. And they're the closest, so I'm most likely to be able to get my comics on Wednesdays by going to them. And they actually have quite a good selection of used comics, and there's another store that I really like to buy used comics from that's across the river in Washington State, Vancouver, Washington, called I Like Comics. If anyone's ever in Vancouver, Washington, I would highly suggest going there. And most of all, I buy my used comics when several of the stores in the area, a couple times a year, will have these 50% off sales. So really their used comic book prices are a little high, just kind of waiting for suckers in a way, or people who aren't, that aware of shopping online. But once the 50% discount's applied, it's a very good price. I think close enough to what I can get on eBay if I do a lot of hunting and stuff. So I enjoy that a lot more. That said, I bought a few things on eBay, and I bought quite a few things from newcadia.com for a while, and I was pretty happy with them. Also had some happy experiences with, what is it called, mycomicbookshop.com or Lone Star Comics, Rob R. Dowdy, Great Legends comic book store, I believe. So those are all good places. I've gotten a few things from Midtown. I feel like I was a little less happy with them. Can't remember why anymore. His second question is, of the online stores, is there one particular store you would recommend above all the others, and if so, why? So with my limited experience, it's those I've mentioned. For trades, above all others, in-stock trades. The prices can't be beat. They package the trades really well. They have a ginormous selection. So yeah. Okay. Then one of the newer guys, I think he's newer, is It's Just Tough 82, does great videos, and he asked me, how many cons do you get to a year, and which is your favorite? I've been to two comic cons, or maybe only one Comic Con. I've been to two comic book related events in my entire life, and the first one was in 1982. It was in Ithaca, New York, and it had Roger Stern and David Michelini and Bob Layton and Brent Anderson there, and it was very sparsely attended. I think Roger Stern had a girlfriend in Ithaca, and so he and a bunch of his friends came up to Ithaca and they built a con around that. And then just last weekend I went to Linework Northwest. That was my second comic book con, which was more of a, I don't know, a publisher's con for small press. So there was a one panel track, and then there was a shopping area, and you could talk to the people at their tables about the comic books that they publish. You know, some of them just were self-publishers, and some were big publishers. So I've been to almost no cons. I keep meaning to go up to Emerald City Con, but things just keep getting in the way. There's another con here in Portland done by the people who own Emerald City Con, but I get the feeling it's pretty focused on non-comic book things, from what I've heard people say. So I've been to a lot of science fiction cons, and I always went to them as a wannabe professional science fiction writer, and I've always found it very unpleasant, and it was all about the networking, and anyway, I just didn't go for it. So there, I haven't been to many cons. What are you drinking? I am drinking, just as in the last video, which I think is what your question was, Mirapon Pale Ale from the Deschutes Brewery, which is on the Deschutes River in Bend, Oregon, and I live in Oregon. They're one of the most dependable, larger local breweries, I believe. I highly recommend their Obsidian Stout, and they have a bunch of other good ones. And the Mirapon is kind of a staple, decent beer that I get. This is one of those towns that calls itself Beervana. There's a million brew pubs and microbrews and all of that. And I love beer. And are you looking forward to the Miller Azzarello Dark Knight 3? No. I only like the Dark Knight 1. Everything Frank Miller's done recently seems kind of to me, which is sad. And it feels, I almost wonder, like, why is he doing this? Is it because his name hasn't been in lights recently, or can they actually offer him enough money for it to make any difference compared to his Hollywood money? It sounds like probably he'll come up with a plot, and Brian Azzarello will actually write it, and someone else will actually draw it. So, you know, possibly Brian Azzarello could save it, but I don't know that Brian Azzarello is like a genius Batman writer. You know, if Miller teamed up with someone who wasn't your standard DC guy, that might be more interesting. You know, if Frank Miller, I don't know, teamed up with one of the more out there people currently doing stuff, Brandon Graham or something like that, that would be really interesting. Luke, Batmanvideoreviews, used to be known as Derek Lucarelli. Great guy, love his videos. Single-minded Batman fan. Not really, he reads other stuff, but he loves Batman. He says, if you had to do a dream hangout group project, what topic would you choose, and who would you want to participate with you? Oh man, there's too many people I'd love to do a hangout with, so I've participated in a number of group projects. I have ideas for other group projects that would be a lot of fun. I would like to do like a group project on Planetary, or a group project on the New Frontier. It would be fun to be part of a semi-regular Batman hangout with you and Josh and other people, maybe John DaCosta and other people like that. It would be fun to do that. My dream would be to have more time to do more hangouts. What's your favorite book you are getting right now? It changes all the time, but right now I feel like it's Tooth and Claw, because I just feel like I really look forward to... I'm most excited for a new issue of Tooth and Claw to come out. There's a lot of close seconds there. And Batman and Robin was way up there, but now it's gone. If you had to give one piece of advice to a new YouTuber, what would you say to him or her? One piece of advice. Comment a lot on other people's videos. I think the only point in doing this is being part of the community. I guess some people have other reasons for doing it, but to me, that's going to be the most satisfying thing. Okay, Mercy's little show, and Mercy, the wonderful Mercy, asked me 4 questions, so I really appreciate that. What made you first decide to start making YouTube videos? Well, probably like many people, I was amazed to find other people on YouTube talking about comic books, and once I realized that it wasn't people just trying to do a show, like The Stack or whatever, or Pete's Basement, but people talking with each other, I got really excited and I really wanted to be a part of that conversation. And what grabbed me the most, and I guess pushed me to actually do it, was when I discovered a series of videos where people in the very small community at the time put out videos. It was kind of like a tag, although it wasn't called a tag, where each person talked about their early comic book history and their personal life, how their personal life brought them into comics. And I've since done some videos like that, probably now a long time ago. And those people who really still stand out in my memory of that were Howler Mouse and MAW0001, who's changed the name of his channel, and Ghost Critic, and Crom de One, and Constant Brahmstar. And so after seeing all those guys' videos, I just wanted to speak out too. I don't like crowds, I don't like groups, but I like to talk. I like friends, but I kind of like them one-on-one, and this is in a weird way, this is the way you can do that with a large group of people at the same time. If you weren't reading comic books anymore, but you kept your channel, what would your channel be about? I mean, it could be about playing around with technology, except that I don't feel like there's much of a community there. So maybe I would switch over to doing a booktube channel. I kind of like the booktube channels I see. They seem to be mostly women, and they all make sure they look nice before they, not for men, but for each other. It's like a little party or something, so that would be a little intimidating. But maybe I'd be a booktuber or something. Okay, here's a tough question, but a very interesting one. If you could write and self-publish a comic book with our good friend Sean Riaz as the artist, what would the book be about? So, I know Sean pretty well, I think, and I think he would love to write Batman, so we couldn't do Batman, so there could be something like Batman. He also loves Buffy, and he actually has a really good idea for a Buffy-like comic book. But those aren't my dream projects. They're great projects. I've seen a little bit of painted work he did of a more goth kind of thing. It would be great if I could think up some kind of equivalent to, you know, Neil Gaiman's Sandman and do that with him. I don't have that idea in my head right this minute, but my self-publishing fantasies include kind of semi-autobiographical comics, but I don't think that would be right to do with Sean, or really quirky out there science fiction, and Sean probably could do that great, but I don't know if it would be his dream project or not. And I don't have any specific ideas. Writing is much harder than it seems. Coming up with ideas that can really work. Other than comics, what else do you collect? I collect vinyl albums. Kind of sporadically. I mean, right now comics are the thing I collect way more than anything else. But I do have some recent purchases. I got this Bill Cosby album for 50 cents. And was quite a thrill for me. And I'd like to just have every Bill Cosby album, to tell you the truth. And then I bought a new vinyl album at a tiny store just 3 blocks away from my house, next to the new comic book shop, of music from the Saharan desert areas of Africa. It turns out to be by a local record producer who travels to Africa a few times a year and produces a record each time he goes. So this is like his 12th record compilation of stuff from Africa. I love African music amongst many other kinds of things. So these are two the used stuff and new stuff that was exciting for me to pick up recently. And then I have a long history, but I'm not active in it at all now, of collecting things relating to print science fiction. So books about science fiction, a little bit of older science fiction books that are a bit rare. So this is the first printing of Frank Herbert's first novel. I don't think that a lot were printed, so that's kind of exciting to me to own that. It may be the most valuable book I own. I'm not sure what its value really is. And then another thing that I liked to get a lot when I was very active was smaller press science fiction books. This is an interesting one because it's from Monkey Brain Books. And some of you may know who Chris Robertson is. He's the creator of iZombie, and he did a lot of writing for DC for a while, and now he's mostly doing smaller book projects for smaller companies. And he's got a digital comic book company called Monkey Brain Comics. But long before he wrote comics, he was publishing a small press. He and his wife together, I believe. He edited this anthology that's called Adventure Volume 1. I don't know if there ever was a Volume 2, but it's got Michael Moorcock in it, Mike Resnick, Kim Newman, and others. I believe there's a story by Robertson in here. He also self-published his small press published a few of his first novels. I think he's pretty much given up on the world of prose for the moment. He's happier doing comic books, but so I liked getting these small press books. Here's another even more small press. I don't even know what the publisher of this is off the top of my head. So I have a lot of small press books, lots and lots of, paperback science fiction novels. Like I said, books about science fiction. And those are usually small press too. Who published this? Mississippi Press or something? University of Mississippi Press. So this guy managed to get into the university presses. So I have a lot of those books about science fiction. Here's another one. and then, and as I said, tons of paperbacks. But also another thing that I liked to collect when I was active was books that are in English but were never published in the United States, most often UK books. And there's lots of fantastic British science fiction writers. You really could say that Britain made science fiction in a lot of ways, starting with H.G. Wells. But anyway, so these are some examples of some ones that I somehow got a hold of in one way or another that were not published in the United States ever. I don't think they've ever been. Maybe they've been since then. I think digital stuff and even just the internet made collecting books a little less fun to me, because it used to feel like, well, this is in print briefly and then it's gone for 90% or more of books. So there was an excitement of finding something, or if you found something you thought you would like in the future, you bought it now because it might not ever get reprinted. But now it feels like, at least in terms of reading, you can always read it digitally, and you can probably always find a copy online. So thank you so much for those questions, Mercy. Batman Knight 89 asked, do you like the new Jared Leto Joker image that was just released? And my first thought is no, I don't like it. And I don't really want to look at him with his shirt off and all of that. So maybe other people will really like looking at him with his shirt off. And for whatever reason, I like the idea of an older Joker. I wasn't that thrilled by the actor who died with Joker. Everyone loved his Joker, but I didn't. He just felt like an obvious, easy, psychopathic anarchist, and I want something else to be going on with the Joker. So I can't really, I feel like looking at that Jared Leto image that Joker's not going to have depth, but I could be wrong. The great legend, Rob, the mighty Rob, who I should have pulled it out. He gave me a gift about a year and a half ago of my first and only original EC comic, the oldest comic I own, and Rob gave it to me. It was a weird fantasy or weird science fiction. I'm sorry, Rob, it's late. Anyway, he asked the question, do you like Captain Marvel better or Captain Marvel? And well, Captain Marvel, he's got Rick Jones, and they smash together their little bracelets, and they switch back and forth between dimensions. And he's got his silver hair flying out, so I've got to say, Shazam! I definitely like, now, like Captain Marvel, the real Captain Marvel, much better. I did like, I was a Marvel kid, and I did think Captain Marvel way back when was cool, especially with Jim Starlin doing him. So if you'd asked me back then, it would have been Marvel. Just picked this up. I would probably read this after filming this video. I'd love it. I really loved this Morrison Marvel, Captain Marvel. I'd love it if Morrison came back to DC and did a Captain Marvel series and kept it kid-friendly. This copy is beat up because my daughter loved it and we read it twice, and she, spent a long time pondering it. So thanks for that question, Rob. I'm in your corner. Let's see. Tylox the Mighty asks, what's your favorite beer and liquor? I used to like rum. That was about the only liquor I ever liked, but I really haven't drunk it in a long time. And favorite beer, there's so many good beers, and I could be at times, well, not a super beer connoisseur, but someone who really likes to try a lot of different beers. I constantly have different favorites. I mentioned the Obsidian Stout by them. I love Guinness. I love Vidmir Hefeweizen that they have here in Portland. A number of other Portland beers that I don't know if they're available elsewhere. So a big favorite of mine, which I think does have national or maybe just West Coast distribution, it's from California somewhere, is Lagunitas IPA. I love IPAs now. I love the really bitter IPAs, which has kind of become a thing, a popular thing at bars. Who's got the most bitter ones? Sometimes they get too bitter for me, but I do the right bitter IPA is really a pleasure. What's your favorite comic? Well, I mentioned my current favorite, which is Autumnland's Tooth and Claw. Of all time, it's really hard to say, but it pretty much centers around Jack Kirby. So could be, Jack Kirby's Fantastic Four run, could be the New Gods, Mr. Miracle, Commandy. In a way, you could lump together all the really great but short runs of Jack Kirby at DC in the early 70s and call those my favorite comics. Other favorites include the Barry Smith run on Conan. I think that's also a big favorite. I guess these favorites are kind of based around artists. I could say Watchmen, really. I suppose I should say Watchmen's my favorite. You get kind of tired of always going to Watchmen, right? I could say the whole body of Alan Moore's work for writers, or Planetary by Warren Ellis. And there's other stuff. So anyway, that gives you a sense of a possible favorite for me. Tylox is a new-ish, not that new anymore, YouTube guy, great guy. Oh, we had another question. What comic did you not like most, art and story? I don't remember the specific comics, but when I was a kid, whenever this guy Frank Robbins would come on a comic book, I would want to tear my hair out. I would hate the art so much. Writing-wise, right now, whenever Ann Nocenti and Scott Lobdell seem to be anything they're writing, I struggle with. Obviously, the writing was really bad on Batwoman, but I only read a few issues of that, so I can't fully judge it. I've tried a lot of Scott Lobdell books and a few Ann Nocenti books, and they also made me want to pull my hair out. Scott Lobdell could be better. There's just, yeah. Okay. Brian, who now calls himself Brian InfraReadCBH&R. He asks, have you ever been disappointed by an overhyped book? Well, and I know that Brian is talking about the fact that he expected to like Batman Year One way more than he did. So the kind of overhyped he's talking about is one with this huge history of overhyped. I've definitely been disappointed by a lot of overhyped events. And even the ones that people look back on and say are good seem disappointing to me. Like even Crisis on Infinite Earths, or, what are other ones people say are good? But another one that was overhyped to me, I still enjoyed it, but not as much as I felt I should, was Hush, the Batman, the 12-issue Batman series. I read it all at once. I did not experience it month by month, which I think might have given me a different perspective on it. Anyway, thanks a lot for that, Brian, and really glad you're part of the community. Jacob, Spidey Sense 101, asks, and he's, I think, pretty new, or just new to me, and a younger high school guy, I believe, but really well-spoken. He says, can you tell us about some of your best experiences on YouTube over the last few years? And the best part for me has been connecting with other people. So hangouts with Travis, hangouts with Sean Riaz. It was great, you know, when I did get to be on a hangout with Rob R. Dowdy, when I got to be on a hangout with Roger over in Puerto Rico. It's also my greatest regret that I haven't found more time for hangouts. The one reason why the few people I've done a lot of hangouts with is because our schedules, or their schedules, are flexible enough to fit mine or something. Travis being in the same time zone I'm in, and Matt, Wednesday Serial, being pretty close to my time zone and also being pretty flexible. And Sean Riaz, I've done a number of hangouts with him because he never sleeps. So, and those are great guys, and it was a great experiences doing hangouts with them. Okay, and if you were thinking of in my own videos, my favorite of my own videos, maybe I'll post a link below, is called Why Are Comics So Addictive? And I did that maybe in my first few months of doing this, and I still, that's my final statement really. I shouldn't make any more videos. I'll try to post that below. Phil Marz, I forget what his YouTube channel used to be called, but he and I chat a lot on Twitter, and we managed one hangout once, but the internet connection was bad. But anyway, he used to have a YouTube channel. I don't know if he still has one up, but he hasn't done videos in a long time, I don't think. Anyway, he was curious about the triple sixes in my name, so it's Sleepy Reader 666. YouTube wanted me to be something more than just Sleepy Reader, so then I went to the 666 because of my name Damien. Just a joke, because before the movie The Omen came out, like people, I would say Damien and they would hear Daniel or David or something. They did, the name Damien was not on their radar and they didn't hear it. And then everything changed when the movie The Omen came out. But then everyone came up to me and said, "Do you have 666 on your forehead?" Anyway, so the connection of me to the devil and 666 is all through that. And so that's why when I needed numbers on Sleepy Reader, I threw 666 on there. But I kind of like it. It fits now because we can connect it to heavy metal if we want, or you know, Damon Hellstrom, the son of Satan, or whatever in the comic books, horror comics. But it doesn't have a deep meaning. But thank you very much for that question, Phil. vbandjay, or vbandjay, asks the question, do you ever worry about giving a book a negative review will alienate a viewer? I find that people see it as a personal insult when I hate a book that they like. This hasn't been an issue that I've thought about a lot in the past, but I think it actually is an interesting issue, especially as the community keeps getting larger and more different people are there. And I think I have been beginning to worry about that a little bit. Like if I really hate an issue of Batman, which I may have done this week, that everyone else seems to love, if I make a video bashing it, am I just making everyone feel bad? And I originally came on here to just celebrate comics and talk about the comics I love, but got more pulled into this weekly conversation about books, and I completely intend to be honest. And then the other, so I don't think it's that big of a problem if I bash a Batman book. My Batman friends are still going to like me, but I feel like I'm being a bit of a downer. But then there's kind of the case of books that are attached to causes. So I kind of held back on Bitch Planet because I didn't love Bitch Planet, but some people, you know, it was so important to them, and I don't want them to feel bashed. I may have anyway, just by a few, you know, less than positive comments about them. And then there was this book that just came out last week called Infinite Loop, that I just reading it on face value was reading it as a science fiction book, but then I looked into it afterwards, after some people made the comment that it was a romance comic, and there was a whole Kickstarter-like thing on it. It's made by French comic book artists, but they wanted to be published in America. But they did a whole fundraiser for the first 3 issues based around the fact that it would be a comic book for people, a love story between 2 women, but I think maybe in general a comic book for people with alternative lifestyles in terms of sexuality. So if I complain about that book, will someone feel like I'm complaining about their lifestyle or something that is important to them emotionally? So I think about that, and I may hold back a little bit occasionally if I'm aware of that as an issue. Or I may just state my own feelings about the book in a careful manner. But I think the whole thing is kind of an issue to think about more for me. So thank you, or maybe not thank you, for bringing that up, vbandjay. JC, the Comic Geek asks, maybe in a general sense, what do you do for a living to support your awesome hobby? I saw you ask this on someone else's Q&A video too, so I think it interests you. Maybe because this can get to be an expensive hobby. I have a job at a high-tech company. I'm not a computer programmer, so I'm not one of the high-paid people, but it's better pay than other jobs I've had in the past. I haven't followed a real strong career path. I was a freelance writer at some point. I've done some editing, some web design, and that was enough to get me in at this job, which I've now been at for 7 years. So, I'm not a doctor or a lawyer or anything, but gives me some wiggle room to indulge myself here and there. Let's see, and then he asked for a room man cave tour, and I'm not up for that right now because it's a total mess. Maybe, and also to really do it takes time, right? But this, you got a line of shelves that has trades, and then up here I've got these boxes of comics and magazines that I have yet to organize. And then over there, you can't really see it, there's a closet which has long boxes in it. There's also a couch here that has stuff piled on it that needs to be dealt with. So I'll do a man cave tour sometime. I never quite get things organized. And I start organizing things, ends up tearing them down, right? Doing all these boxes was a result. I got halfway organized by putting stuff in these boxes, but then I still haven't gone the next step of organizing beyond that. And JC also asks, what made you start doing your YouTube channel? And I already answered that because Mercy also asked that. Stacey Gallagher, who I think has been watching the comic book community for quite a long while, maybe at least as long as I've been doing videos. I'm not sure how long you've been watching and commenting, Stacey, but you've been around a long time. And he asks, do you prefer older art and writing or modern art and writing in comics? When I read the older comic, I want to say older comics. But other times I feel like this flood of really cool new stuff, and then I get excited by the new stuff. And I think currently comics are much better than they were, say, 10 years ago, in aggregate, and 15 and 20 years ago, but comparing them to the 80s and 70s and 60s, it's very tricky, because they're such a different beast, and I really like some of those 80s, 70s, and 60s comics. And then, of course, you've got comics like the EC comics from the 50s. Are those better than anything published now? Might be. It depends what you're looking at. I'd say overall, if I had to generalize, I like the art better back then, and a lot of the writing now I like a lot because there's a lot more variety in the writing. I definitely like the coloring now better. If you asked me that 10 years ago, I would have said the coloring was way better in the 80s and earlier than it is now. But the computerized coloring, they finally gotten to a point where the computerized coloring really is amazing and really can change your reading experience of a comic. So that's the complicated answer to that. Will indies become more popular than the big two? I think they will become equal to the big two. So I think you might see... Well, you're already pretty close to seeing the bigger indie comics together on aggregate being as big as DC is. I think eventually they'll be as big as Marvel is, you know, like 5 or 6 companies together as big as Marvel. And maybe a little more than that, you know, maybe they will, I could see them being a little bigger when you add them all together. But I think no one indie comic book company, even DC, is going to, you know, become another Marvel or DC. Okay, last but not least, to ask me questions was Gore Vidal. And I've been seeing comments by him around, it feels like, for a month or two. And now he's just recently started making videos. I think he's got 3 videos up, so you should all go subscribe to him. Clearly an interesting perspective on things. He says, if an illustrator could paint your dreams, who would you choose? My first glib answer is Hieronymus Bosch. Might as well have some really interesting dreams, right? I think, though, a lot of my dreams might be properly illustrated by, who's the artist for Fatal, the artist who does all those books with Ed Brubaker. Suddenly I've forgotten his name. I love his artwork. I just bought an OGN by him, an original trade. Now I can't think of it. Other dreams, maybe Richard Corbin could illustrate them. Richard Corbin and Hieronymus Bosch as a team on my dreams. Did you ever watch Bally Kiss Angel or Northern Exposure? I'm not sure what the point of that is, because I don't know what Bally Kiss Angel is. Northern Exposure was this fun thing that I was kind of addicted to back during 1 or 2 of its seasons when it was on the air. I haven't gone back and ever watched it again. It was a town with quirky characters, and there was a certain feel of magical realism about it that I liked. I like quirky characters with magical realism. I don't know if Bally Kiss Angel is like that. I have no idea what that is. I should look it up. And then Mr. Gore Vidal. It's nice to be followed by such a preeminent author. I'm not even sure if he's still alive or not. Gore Vidal asks, what is the... But you can tell he's a literary man, so it must be the real Gore Vidal. What is the novel, short story, or poem you find yourself rereading over and over again? I just can't stop reading Gilgamesh, the very first narrative ever written, right? Ever written down by the ancient Sumerians. And then I read over and over again Watt by Samuel Beckett. No, that's all a lie. There's just something about your videos that I've seen that made me want to say that. I wanted to be really obscure and intellectual. The book I've reread most in my life is Dune by Frank Herbert. Yeah, because I first read it when I was 11, and I probably last read it 6 or 7 years ago, in my late 40s. I decided to pick out some others, just because I think you're curious about what's important to me as a non-comic book reader. I have read 100 Years of Solitude a lot, so I like the magical realism. And I've reread a lot of the short stories in this collection of the same author, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, many times. Certain ones were my favorites, such as The Very Old Man with the Enormous Wings. I've kind of imitated that story in at least one of my stories. The Handsomest Drowned Man in the World. There's others, but I'm not picking them out. Another book I've reread, well, I've reread certain short stories in this book multiple times. This is Lucius Shepard's first collection of short fiction, dating back to like 1980, so it's 88, that's weird. Because I could have sworn I bought this book in 87. Anyhow, oh, this is the wrong book. This is Ends of the Earth. I meant to grab his other book called The Jaguar Hunter. That's the one where I've really reread stories a lot. There's a story in there called R&R and a story called The Spanish Lesson, and I've reread those multiple times, and he's an odd combination of science fiction and magical realism. Another book that in the short story area that I've reread a lot is Gene Wolfe's The Island of Dr. Death and Other Stories, because there's a story in here called The Island of Dr. Death and Other Stories. And this is one of my absolute favorite short story collections. I recently recommended it to Scott Constance-Bromstar, who is collecting books by Gene Wolfe. Gene Wolfe is this amazing science fiction writer. And there's a couple short stories in here that I always in particular reread a lot. Hero is Werewolf, Tracking Song, 7 American Nights, The Death of Dr. Island. I have it all marked up. I think at one point I was making Xeroxes of stories from here to give to certain friends. Which is the one? Tracking Song. I really love Tracking Song here. So this is going to be meaningless to almost everybody, but I'm at the end of the video. Most of you aren't watching anymore. Maybe this will tell Mr. Gore Vidal something about my reading. Another book I reread a lot, but I haven't in decades, was Women by Charles Bukowski. So that's a whole nother side, outside of the sort of science fiction magical realism side, that once interested me. And the final question, also from the esteemed Gore Vidal, he asks, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Doors, or Love? Well, I have no idea who Love is, but in this case I went and I looked it up on YouTube because it's so convenient to find out about old groups, and Love was a sort of psychedelic, sort of garage rock, garage band group, I guess, depending on which song or album you're listening to, from the 60s, who never toured around very much, so didn't become that famous, but maybe they're famous amongst certain connoisseurs and influential. Of those choices, I'd have to say the Rolling Stones, and maybe after them the Doors. Everyone loves the Beatles, and I can appreciate that fact, but for whatever reason their music doesn't feel as authentic to me. I like a band that's kind of grinding out their music, if you will. And I guess, asking about the Beatles or the Stones is a touchstone because seemingly everybody knows who they are. But I was born kind of in between the baby boomers and Generation X. My sympathies are much more with Generation X than the baby boomers. I was really sick of following on their heels. And I get sick of, I feel like a year or two before I die, finally the baby boomers will be gone, and maybe we can talk about something else. Musically, I think it would be more interesting to ask, who do you prefer, Howling Wolf or John Lee Hooker or Muddy Waters, or Funkadelic versus James Brown, or I don't know, The Clash or the Ramones or whatever. I don't find the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and the Doors to be central to culture. They were good musicians, they did some great stuff. To me, the Rolling Stones had the longest interesting career and were most authentic feeling of those groups of people, but there's just lots of other stuff that interests me way more than those people. No offense or anything. I probably will go back and listen to a little more Love. It's kind of interesting, but I don't give special credence to that era of music or that era of culture in America or in the Western world, as some people do. I guess I've always wanted to say that and get that off my chest. So thank you for giving me that opportunity, Gore. Thanks to everyone for asking questions, for watching and commenting on my videos over the past 3 years. Another big highlight of YouTube is just all the comments and answering the comments and the back and forth there. A great thrill to even the people that I'm not hanging out with in person that often, if I have a little chat with them, like through my Gmail chat or whatever. You know, that's awesome. I have a lot of conversations with R. Dowdy that way. Not recently, he's kind of moved on to other things, I guess, but yeah. So the communication in various ways has really been fantastic, more than I could have expected when I started, even though I was hopeful for some kind of connection when I first did it. Because I literally have never had friends that into comic books. I have a few friends here and there who are a little bit into comic books, but this has been such a thrill for me to talk about comic books as much as I possibly could want to, and listen to all of you guys talk about them. So keep doing it. If you're thinking about starting a channel, do it. If you have started a channel and you might be subscribed to me, but when you subscribe to me you didn't have a channel, let me know. Because when I first get a subscriber, I do go and check and see if they've got an active channel. But if they don't, I don't subscribe. Or if the channel is not at all about comics, I usually, don't subscribe. So, anyway, hang in there everyone, and I will talk to you soon.